Hey guys, this is your reminder today to stop giving yourself a hard fucking time, because where you're at right now, or what you're working on right now, or what you have right now, or how you look and how you're showing up in the world right now isn't aligning with the sense of what you think it ought to be or what you feel it should be. Yeah, stop giving yourself a hard time, because I want to share some things with you today that have really helped me in letting go of the rod by which I'm beating myself over the back with, saying, you need to do better. It's not good enough. You're not in step with your peers. You need to catch up. All of these reasons, all of these means by which we beat ourselves up with, it's doing nobody any favors. And we need to learn how to release ourselves from the prison of should and ought to, in order to fully experience the joy and the abundance and the gifts that we have in front of us right now. So if that's resonating with you a little bit or a lot of it, hang out here for a second. I'm just going to quickly introduce myself for anyone who doesn't know who I am. My name is S.A.A.R.A. I'm a musician from London. I write and produce my own genre-defiant EDM funk music. I'm self-taught, and I have also found myself having to really confront a lot of the bullshit stories and games that I was running on myself, that was keeping me feeling stuck, keeping me feeling inauthentic, keeping me feeling like I wasn't good enough to live into the dreams that were living in my heart and my soul. I am also a creative empowerment coach, because I fully believe that a huge part of me understanding that there were changes I needed to make in my life came from me trusting and engaging with and nurturing my creative practice, which is music. I fully believe that we are all creative beings, whether it's music, whether it's film, whether it's photography, whether it's cooking, whether it's a business, whatever it might be, we are all creative beings. And when we really get honest and start listening to that deep inner knowing, that's when we start to really find who we are and grow into who we get to be. I am also someone who is coming back from a period of breakdown, block, burnout, where basically my whole life went to shit. Partly thanks to me waking up one day and realizing I'm not living an authentic life. I am full of people pleasing. I'm full of self-doubt. I'm a huge lack of self-trust. I was looking everywhere but from inside within myself. I was looking everywhere for validation. And what did that give me? It gave me burnout. It gave me a career that went nowhere. It gave me a toxic workplace, and it gave me frenemies that actually I had to get very real with and say, okay, this whole thing needs to stop, and I need to take radical responsibility for rebuilding a life that feels like my own. And these videos are part of that journey, and I think it's important to share that journey, particularly in a world, in these online environments where everyone's telling you the magic formula is this thing that I'm going to sell you, and then you'll be able to scale your business, change your life, create six-figure income, all of these things. And it's like, yeah, that's all very nice, but right now I'm in the trenches, and I need to know how I can get through this hard bit in order to do the next bit. Well, yeah, I'm here with you right now. If you're thinking, I want to change my life and I don't know where to start here. Please like, please subscribe, stay tuned, walk with me, because hopefully in sharing each step along the way that I'm taking in order to get my life back on track, there's something in it for you that will help and inspire. And please also share this with your friends who may also need a bit of a pep talk. The last thing I'll say is thank you so much to all of my new subscribers. It is such a privilege to have you here. Thank you for walking with me on this journey. I'm so glad that these messages are resonating with you. And yeah, stay tuned. Please lock in and please continue to share with me how these videos are landing with you, and what sort of nuggets and gems are percolating for you as we walk through this journey together. So yeah, beating ourselves up because we're not the thing as we think the thing should be, whether that's we're not in that place in our career where we think we ought to be, or in relationships in the way we think they ought to look, we're not having those experiences in the way we think they ought to be. You know, there's so many reasons out there that we can say to ourselves, we're behind. We're behind because we're not good enough. We're behind because we're not pretty enough. We're behind because we're not young enough. We're behind because, you know, a myriad of reasons, a myriad of excuses, a myriad of sort of rods to use to beat our own backs with and say, this is your fault, because actually the way it ought to be and the way you are right now are worlds apart. And actually the only thing you can do with that is self-hatred, self-loathing, and give up. I want to call bullshit on that, because actually what the problem is there, and at least in my experience, I've zeroed in on this idea, this one specific way that the thing I'm hoping to cultivate, or the thing that I'm hoping to be, I've zeroed in this one specific way that shows up or could show up in my life. And I've been punishing myself on a daily basis because where I'm at doesn't look like that specific thing. And I've talked about this a lot in previous videos. I've talked about the power of release and how releasing things that don't serve you, whether that's that toxic job, as soon as you can and in a way that you can, release that shit, because it will change you before you change it. Whether it's those frenemies that actually, you know, they're not really in your corner to be in your corner. They're kind of in your corner to kick dirt in your face. You know, releasing these sort of constructions on what it should be to be who you are, your lived unique experience in your beautiful unique body. Society on some level feels like it has this vice-like influence on what we should look like, how we should present, what our skin and our hair and our clothes and our bodies should be. And we find ourselves, rather than questioning whether there's any flexibility in these constructs, we start questioning why we're not able to meet the rigidity of these constructs. And it is a painful experience, you know, it's a painful experience when you think in the society, particularly for women, particularly for non-white women, there's a certain way we're expected to show up. There's a certain way we're expected or prejudged to be. And if you either live into that or you don't, and the repercussions that come with that. And I've found in my journey, being able to release these preconceived ideas of who I ought to be, how this looks, what does success look like, has been really freeing. And particularly when it came to my creative work, this was a huge challenge. And I'd say now, with some space and time, since I've worked in a live performance capacity with collaborators in the format of a band, it's been some time since I've had to release that, because the vision I had, where it was like, okay, we've got this set lineup and we're all, you know, in it together, one vision, one team, we're with friends, it's convivial, there's kinship, there's trust, there's respect, there's this mutuality of, you know, passion and desire to all arrive in this one, you know, I wanted to be playing festivals by the time I was, you know, 40. I wanted us to have this a certain look. I wanted us to, you know, and I understand now that I held this vision so tightly. I was punishing myself on a routine basis because actually what I had didn't match what I was aspiring to be. And it meant that I was pushing so hard in a direction that it was never going to materialize, because actually, if you're needing to convince people to be part of your vision, if you're needing to convince people to bring the energy, to convince them to bring the commitment and the effort, more convincing isn't going to change the fact that those people needed convincing in the first place. It isn't going to change the fact that those people were never for your vision, you know? And I spent a lot of time, energy, money, effort in essentially pushing a boulder up a hill only to have it roll back down and squish me, because that boulder was never going to make it to the top of that hill. And once I was able to release this very prescriptive idea of what I wanted my creative project to be, what I wanted my band to be, how I wanted that to look, it gave me a lot of freedom. And it gave me a lot of freedom to understand that the camaraderie, the trust, the creative expression, all of these elements were there. They did exist. I did have them within my grasp, but I wasn't able to see them and appreciate them and call them in and forge something organically, because I was so fixated on this one way that my creative project should or ought to be. And I can say that now because right now I'm not working with a live band lineup, but I am collaborating with musicians to create recordings. And I'm not working in a live band lineup, but I am creating networks of kinship and friendship and camaraderie by performing with other artists. And you know, these electrifying gigs that I wanted to do, and to have these, you know, nights where people are coming together and partying and having a great time and releasing the stresses and the weights of the world, and the weighing senses of their own inhibitions because they're coming and they're dancing. I still get to do that. And in fact, I've been booked to perform as a singer at a show at the end of the month, and it's actually a repeat of a club night that was done last year. And I was invited back because why? There's a sense of camaraderie and connection and respect for who I am as an artist. And when I zoomed out and let go of this idea of being a failure because I don't have a band anymore, and I don't have a band in the way that I'd like it to be, and I don't, you know, I'm not currently performing my own music, which upsets me a lot. But when I was able to step back and say, okay, the reasons why you were making music in the first place was to firstly put love and energy and joy and fun out into the world, to connect with other musicians and feel a sense of kinship and collaboration, to grow as an artist and challenge myself in ways that, you know, I wouldn't have thought would have been possible for me. You know, all of those things are here. All of those things I'm doing right now, all of those things I get to celebrate, that I am still showing up for my craft in that way. And being more open to the possibility of what it is we're looking to call in or what it is that we would love to experience, being open to the possibility that it could show up in a number of different formats is just so freeing. And when I started to do that, and not just with my creative work, but even in terms of my career and the job landscape that I was looking at, I was thinking, okay, I'm trapped in this really toxic environment, but it's I can kind of manage that because it gives me the space and time to work on my creative work. My commute is quite minimal, you know. I'm able to have a degree of flexibility. I'm able to balance the rigors of delivering a good job and also having space and time to work on my business and my art practice. So I was gripping onto this space that was really not a place that I ought to be in. And again, like the analogy of rolling a boulder up a hill, like if I could just prove to them that I'm someone worthy of respect, if I could just prove to them that I ought to be treated better, if I could just prove to them that they may not mean to be, but they are hella kind of racist. And, you know, if we can have conversation, you know, and I was doing all of this heavy lifting in an environment that was not for me. And I stayed there for as long as I did because I was thinking, this is the only place that's going to give me the freedom to work on my creative projects. And when I let go and I released and I said, do you know what? I'm just going to walk away. I then found another space where, okay, my commute is manageable. I get flexibility. I get respect. I get support. I actually get way better remuneration, which enables me to invest more into my creative work. Again, I was able to call all of those things in and experience those things because I released the idea that it had to be this one specific format. I was able to say, okay, this is what I'd like to call in. I need flexibility. I need to be able to, in an evening, get home quite quickly. You know, if I've got gigs or rehearsals, I need to be able to like switch out the bags, like switch out the laptops, grab the bass, go back out the door. You know, I can't be trying to juggle all of that and a huge commute, you know. So I was trying to be really mindful about the physical space where I worked and then also the energetic space in which I worked. And I'm so thrilled to say that I've been able to find that and then some in a new place because I've released this bind that I had with it having to be this is the only way that this is going to show up for me. So in a roundabout way, what I'd love to do through this video is invite you to start looking at where in your life are you holding on to this notion and idea of what you ought to be or of how it ought to be or of what you should be or how it ought to be done. Where are you holding so tightly onto this idea that you're missing so many other amazing opportunities, that you're actually forcing yourself into a place where there is disrespect, where there is no support, where it is depleting for you because you're thinking, you know what, this is the only way I'm gonna get acceptance, love, respect, remuneration, whether it's, you know, financial or whatever else it might be. We don't have to punish ourselves for not being that one specific thing because we get to be so many things, and everything that we're looking for already exists. We just have to be open to accept it however it might show up for us. So it's a bit of a rambly one today, but I really hope that helps because I now try and in any situation look for where can I release a grip on something in order to open up the potential to receive so much more. And I think that's something that we can all do if we want to start living a life that feels more like our own, experience a lot less guilt and kind of self-loathing, and dial up compassion and joy is just learning to be a little bit more open and learning to firstly release what doesn't serve us, but also release an idea that it has to be something so specific that we rule out all other possibility of those things showing up in other forms. So I hope that helps. Please let me know if this resonates with you. As always, it's just such a joy to spend this time with you, and I will see you next week. Have a great day.